Hi, crime enthusiasts. This is your host Ishita, and today's story is about 39-year-old Julie Mary Patterson. In the sweltering summer of 1991, the quiet desert town of Fountain Hills, Arizona, was a place where life moved at a leisurely pace. Neighbors greeted each other by name, children played freely in the streets, and most people didn't think twice about leaving their doors unlocked. But that small town sense of security was shattered forever when Julie Mary Patterson was found murdered in her home on Loveport, a peaceful area that had never seen such horror. Sometimes, during the night of August 8 or the early hours of August 9, an unknown intruder entered Julie's house. There were no signs of forced entry, no shattered windows, or broken locks. Nothing to suggest a struggle. Yet, what unfolded inside was brutal and merciless. Julie was bludgeoned to death with an unidentified weapon in an attack so swift and silent that even her beloved dog, her loyal companion, seemed completely undisturbed. Her friends grew concerned when they hadn't heard from her over a day. On August 10th, they arrived at her home, expecting to find an explanation for her uncharacteristic silence. Instead, they were met with a chilling sight. Julie's lifeless body sprawled across her sofa, her home now a crime scene, and her murderer nowhere to be found. What happened to Julie that night? Who was the person she may have let inside? And why? After all these years, does her killer remain a ghost in the shadows? Julie Mary Patterson was the kind of woman people gravitated towards, vivacious, outgoing, and effortlessly warm. At 39, she had built a fulfilling life in Fountain Hills, a place she had come to love since moving from the Midwest a few years earlier. She was ambitious and hardworking, building her career as a mortgage broker while keeping books for local businesses on the side. But it wasn't just her profession that defined her. Julie was deeply embedded in the community, volunteering at church, helping organize events, and playing a key role in the Fountain Hills Chamber of Commerce annual Thanksgiving Day parade. She had a sharp sense of humor, an infectious laugh, and a deep love for the holiday season, especially Christmas, when she had an uncanny ability to find the perfect gift for everyone, often something they never knew they needed until they unwrapped it. To those who knew her best, she wasn't just a friend or a family member. She was a presence, someone who made the world feel a little brighter. Her niece, Kelly O'Connor, described her simply: Julie was everyone's favorite. Born into a large Midwestern family, she embraced her role as the beloved Jules, always bringing warmth, laughter, and generosity into the lives of those around her. She gave her time freely, always ready to help, whether it was at the church, the community, or planning the Thanksgiving Day parade. By all accounts, she was happy, settled in both her personal and professional life, looking forward to the future. But the future was something Julie would never get to see. Recently, she had been busy, but never too busy for her friends. That is why it was concerning when on Friday, August 9th, her employer's call went unanswered. Friends eager to finalize plans for a weekend barbecue also received no response. As the hours passed in silence, their concern deepened. By the early afternoon on Saturday, August 10th, two of Julie's friends who could no longer ignore the feeling that something was wrong, turned off Seguro Boulevard, made their way down to Courtside Drive and onto Love Court, where Julie's home sat near the end of the quiet cul-de-sac. They knocked. No answer. Pushing the door open, they stepped inside. The house was still, eerily undisturbed. And then they saw her. Julie was lying on the sofa, motionless. At first, they thought that she might be asleep, until they stepped closer. Something was wrong. Her body was too still, the room too quiet. A wave of dread set in. Without hesitation, they rushed out of the house and called the police. They knew she was dead, but the thought of murder didn't cross their minds, at least not at first. Investigators arrived at the scene and quickly determined that Julie had died from a blow to the head. Yet, the crime scene offered more questions than answers. There were no signs of forced entry, no valuables were missing, there was no evidence of sexual assault. Even more chilling, Julie's dog, her loyal companion, had been left alive and seemingly undisturbed. Whoever had entered her home that night had done so silently, swiftly, and without a trace. No murder weapon was ever found. No fingerprints, no signs of struggle. More than 25 years later, the case remains unsolved. No arrests have been made, no suspects named. That peaceful desert town that Julie had come to love was left with a lingering question. Who killed Julie Patterson and why? The answers remain buried in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. On August 9, 1991, as the blistering Arizona sun beat down on Maricopa County, authorities found themselves grappling with one of the most brutal and perplexing crimes in the region's history. That summer, the county was rocked by a shocking mass murder. 9 Buddhist monks and temple workers were slaughtered in execution style in an unincorporated area west of Phoenix. It was a case so grisly and high profile that it captured national headlines, demanding the full attention of the law enforcement. But amid the chaos of that gruesome temple massacre, another tragedy unfolded, one that for many seemed to slip through the cracks. The body of Patterson, whose first name was often omitted in news reports of the time, was discovered in a separate crime scene that drew little media attention compared to the Buddhist temple killings. Unlike the widely covered mass murder, Patterson's case lacked the immediate shock value of multiple victims, but it was just as brutal, just as inexplicable, and just as worthy of justice. Despite the overwhelming attention given to the Buddhist temple murders, detectives assigned to Patterson's case insisted that their investigation did not suffer. Official records indicate that more than 300 interviews were conducted in pursuit of the truth. Many individuals were questioned multiple times. The case file grew to more than 6 inches thick, filled with leads, witness statements, and forensic reports. Yet, there was skepticism. The Maricopa County Sheriff's Office was stretched thin at that time. With limited manpower and forensic resources, nothing compared to the technological advancements of today. Many believed that Patterson's case had been sidelined in favor of solving the more sensational mass killing. In a county much smaller than it is now, with fewer officers and investigative tools, the sheer scale of the temple murder inquiry made it hard for any other case to receive equal attention. 1 year after the Patterson's murder, the controversial and tough-talking Joe Arpaio was elected as the new Maricopa County Sheriff. Known for his hardline stances on crime, Arpaio later became a Fountain Hills resident himself. Over the years, when pressed about the handling of the Patterson case, he remained measured in his response, unwilling to pass judgment on the initial investigation. We may have 3 or 4 high-profile cases under investigation, Arpaio said in an interview years later. That doesn't mean guy found dead in the gutter is going to be ignored. Despite these assurances, Patterson's case remains unsolved, lingering in the shadows of one of Arizona's most infamous murder cases. On that fateful day, authorities were also confronted with the deadliest mass shooting in Arizona's history. At the Wat Promkunaram Buddhist temple in Vadale, 9 people, including monks and temple workers, were found brutally executed in what was initially believed to be a robbery gone wrong. The sheer horror of the crime sent shockwaves throughout the community, dominating headlines and consuming the resources of law enforcement. It took more than 2 decades for justice to be served. In 2014, Jonathan Doody was finally convicted of the mass murder and sentenced to 9 consecutive life terms in prison. However, during these initial stages of investigation, authorities struggled to piece together the events, leading to wrongful arrests and painstakingly long pursuit of the true perpetrator. At the scene of Patterson's murder, investigators collected multiple pieces of evidence, including fingerprints and fabric fibers. This crucial forensic materials was sent to the Arizona Department of Public Safety Crime Lab for analysis. However, forensic testing in the early 1990s was far less sophisticated than today's DNA-based techniques. Without the advanced databases and forensic software available now, investigators had to rely heavily on traditional detective work, tracking down witnesses, and re-examining crime scene details in painstaking fashion. Although numerous interviews were conducted and pieces of physical evidence analyzed, no arrests were ever made in the Patterson's case. Leads grew cold, and as the years passed, the murder of Patterson faded from public consciousness, overshadowed by the temple killings, which themselves took years to finally unravel. The items collected from the crime scene ultimately failed to provide the crucial details needed to identify the killer. In 1991, without social media, Facebook, or Twitter, rumors about a murder case spread the old-fashioned way, through word-of-mouth gossip, fueling speculation about the crime. In 2003, the Republic reported that Patterson's mother suspected her daughter was in some kind of trouble before her death. She revealed that just a week prior to being killed, Patterson had made arrangements for her own funeral and had expressed interest in purchasing a gun, both signs that, in hindsight, seemed like warnings of impending danger. According to O'Connor, Patterson's mother has since passed away. At the time of her death, Patterson worked as a loan officer and was reportedly involved with clients who had criminal histories, raising further questions about her associations and whether they played a role in her fate. That same year, the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office confirmed to the Republic that investigators had recovered a fingerprint from the crime scene, one that, despite their efforts, was never identified. A few years ago, a detective from the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, Major Crimes Unit, visited the Times, sifting through old reports and revisiting long cold leads in the unsolved murder of Patterson. As part of his investigation, he sat down with publisher Alan Cruikshank, who had once been Patterson's neighbor, and his son, Brent Cruikshank, who, as a teenager, had occasionally taken care of Patterson's dog. The conversation was one of many attempts to piece together a mystery that had remained unsolved for decades. But there was another thread in the case, one that had surfaced unexpectedly. One stifling August night, years before, a group of teenagers had been hanging out in the Wash, a dry riverbed that cut through the neighborhood, when they became aware of something unusual. In the heavy silence of the desert night, with cicadas buzzing and the air thick with heat, they sensed someone nearby, a presence, a figure moving in the shadows. But it was fleeting, so quick and indistinct that none of them could say with certainty who or what they had seen. They had no way of knowing whether the person had noticed them in return, whether they had been observed just as they were observing. At the time, it didn't seem significant. Just another moment of eerie uncertainty in a darkened stretch of town. It wasn't until years later that one of those teens, now an adult, reached out to the Times with a story that had haunted him. He claimed to have been among the group that night, and for the first time, he revealed what they had experienced. He was urged to contact the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office to share his account with detectives who might still be looking for answers. But according to Maricopa County Sheriff Office records, that call never came. If the man ever intended to follow through, something stopped him. And with his silence, another potential piece of the puzzle slipped away. Based on the timeline of events, authorities believe that the killer may have passed those very teens before making their way up through the steep incline of the Wash, disappearing into the Fontana neighborhood. It was a route that would have provided cover, concealed by darkness, tucked between homes, and offering a discreet exit from the crime scene. Even decades later, investigators remained drawn to this theory. As recently as 2019, Maricopa County Sheriff's detectives executed a search warrant at a property within the Fontana subdivision, following a lead that had taken years to develop. For a brief moment, there was a hope that an answer long buried might finally come to light. But a spokesperson for the sheriff's office later confirmed to the Times that the detectives haven't found what they were looking for. The search had led them to another dead end. And so, the case remains open, its secrets lingering in the quiet corners of the past where a figure once moved through the night, unseen but not unnoticed. Kelly O'Connor, Julia's niece, says, "For 28 years, our family has endured the agony of unanswered questions, longing for justice, for closure, for even the smallest shred of resolution. In that time, we have gathered for births and weddings, moments of joy that Julie should have been a part of. Yet, every celebration has been clouded by her absence, a silent reminder of all that was stolen from us. Her laughter, her warmth, her love, taken in an instant, leaving an unfeelable void in our lives." Kelly O'Connor's grandmother went to her grave, never knowing who killed her daughter. She spent the final years of her life burdened with unbearable grief, left with nothing but unanswered questions and the hollow ache of loss. And now, nearly 3 decades later, her family remains in the same agonizing limbo, still waiting, still pleading for justice. Julie had visited her mother and niece in St. Thomas earlier that year, a cherished memory now frozen in time. But beyond that visit, little was known about her life in Arizona, her circle of friends, her daily routine, or anything that might explain how she became the target of such a brutal crime. Yet one thing remains certain: someone out there knows the truth. Whether they have chosen to withhold it from the police or have remained silent all these years, the hope is that they will finally find the courage to come forward. Why this case remains unsolved is a mystery as painful as it is frustrating. The family has been patient. They have placed their faith in law enforcement, staying in contact, cooperating in every possible way. And yet, what has come of it? What progress has truly been made? Nearly 3 decades later, what do they have to show for it? A 6-inch case file and a name still lost in the dark. Reports suggest that law enforcement has compiled a so-called hefty file on the case, but the reality is stark. No arrests, no closure. Julie's killer remains free, walking among them, while her family continues to live in the agony of uncertainty. One of the greatest injustices in this case was timing. Julie's murder was discovered either on the same day or the day after the Buddhist temple massacre, a horrific crime that dominated headlines and consumed law enforcement resources. And so, her case was pushed aside, overshadowed by a larger tragedy. The question haunts them: if the timing had been different, would Julie's murder have received the same attention it deserved? Would her killer have been caught? There is also fear that mistakes were made in those early critical days. Were crucial opportunities missed? Was the case mishandled in ways that can never be undone? Those answers may never come. But what is known, without a doubt, is that nearly 30 years later, justice remains elusive. On August 7th, Kelly O'Connor's letter to the editor was published in the Republic, urging a renewed focus on her aunt's case. Julie was not just another name on a long list of unsolved crimes, not just another cold case buried in forgotten files. She was a daughter, a friend, a beloved aunt who brought warmth and light into the lives of those who knew her. To O'Connor, she was more than family. She was like an older sister, someone she admired, someone whose absence left a wound that time has failed to heal. And so, she makes a desperate plea to law enforcement, to the media, to the public. Do not forget Julie. If anyone knows anything, no matter how insignificant it may seem, please come forward. Somewhere, someone holds the missing piece. Someone has the key to unlocking the truth. 28 years is a lifetime to wait for justice, but they cannot wait forever. This case is deeply unsettling, and the more details emerge, the more questions arise. Julie was afraid enough to talk about getting a gun. She pre-planned her own funeral, an eerie and tragic sign that she may have felt something was coming. And yet, despite this apparent fear, she left her back door open for her dog, her front door unlocked. It doesn't make sense. If she truly felt threatened, wouldn't she have taken every precaution to secure her home? Or was she caught off guard by someone she knew? Someone she never expected to harm her? Then there's the question of motive. Law enforcement ruled out robbery early on because nothing appeared to be taken. But was that conclusion too hasty? In 2003, the Republic reported that Julie's family recalled a golf club missing from her home, something investigators had either overlooked or dismissed at that time. Could that missing item have been the murder weapon? And if so, was it taken intentionally to cover up the crime? Or could it have been simply discarded somewhere nearby? Was this a crime of opportunity or was it premeditated? Did Julie unknowingly let her killer inside, trusting them enough to leave the doors open? Was she being watched in the days leading up to her murder? Had someone been studying her routine, waiting for the perfect moment to strike? And what about the timing? Her murder happened at the same time as the Buddhist temple massacre, a high profile case that consumed law enforcement resources. Could crucial evidence have been overlooked in those chaotic early days? Did someone say something but never come forward because the crime was buried beneath the weight of another tragedy? Another chilling thought: was Julie's fear justified for a reason far more sinister than we know? Could she have been receiving threats? Was she being followed? If so, why didn't she share more with the family or law enforcement? Did she know the killer? And if she did, was she too afraid to speak out? Theories swirl, but hard evidence remains elusive. Was this a burglary gone wrong with the missing golf as unintended clue? Was it a targeted attack, possibly by someone she encountered in her personal or professional life? Could it have been someone obsessed with her? Someone who believed that they had a claim to her life? Someone knows the truth. The pieces are there. They just need to be put together before the silence stretches into eternity. The case remains open, and the detectives are still listening, still waiting for the one clue, the one recollection, the one small detail that would finally unlock the truth. Cases like this aren't solved by sudden revelation or dramatic breakthrough. They are pieced together bit by bit from the memories, whispers, and fragments of the past that people may not even realize are significant. Maybe you saw something unusual that night but dismissed it as nothing. Maybe you overheard a conversation, a rumor, a fleeting remark that didn't seem important at that time. Maybe there's a detail that has lingered in the back of your mind for years, an uneasy feeling, a name that was mentioned in passing, a face you can't quite place. This is the moment to come forward. Time does not erase guilt. Julie's murderer has walked freely for nearly 3 decades, carrying the weight of a crime that shattered a family and left an unfillable void. But the truth has a way of resurfacing even after all these years. It just needs the right person to bring it into the light. If you remember anything, no matter how small or uncertain, now is the time to speak. One phone call could make the difference between justice delayed and justice denied. Contact the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. It's not too late. It's never too late. Thank you for joining me today. Don't forget to subscribe to my podcast on Spotify and YouTube so you never miss an update. I appreciate you joining me today. Have an amazing weekend ahead. Until then, stay safe, crime enthusiasts.